Good morning, everybody. I'm hoping to engage you in a conversation because I think conversations are how we are going to overcome the uncertainty in technology and education. And what I'd like to do is present a framework for a series of conversations that I've named as catalytic conversations, conversations that stir things up. And I think help overcome some of the uncertainty that causes some of the challenges for people as they begin to implement the different kinds of technology applications that people are trying to pull. It isn't working. So what I want to do as we dive into this conversation is frame 7 major conversations that in my entering my third decade of doing this work of implementing technology in the world of education, these 7 right now seem to be the ones that are important for you to overcome the uncertainty that you might be having as you're thinking about implementing different kinds of technology within your higher education sector. To set up the conversation, I want to do 2 things right up front. One is I'm going to be talking about a lot of research and a lot of model programs. There is going to be a plenary session afterward where we're going to dive into 5 specific case studies. We're going to get much more kind of concrete and detailed about how people have done this. But I want you to know that I'm going to provide the PowerPoint presentation to the folks at the conference and then allow anybody here to be able to use the PowerPoint presentation. And I've designed it where it has links out to other research articles and model programs so you can use it for your own research and your conversations. I'm always careful about PowerPoint. I do a lot of student focus groups, and students have told me that many times they feel like it's death by PowerPoint, so I'm careful. They feel like sometimes that many people who use PowerPoint have no power nor a point, so I'm careful. This will only be about 18 slides, and it will hopefully frame these conversations for you. Second, before we go into these conversations, I want to do a quick exercise. Just kind of a fun, light exercise, but in particular it's around neuroscience, and it has to do with our own way of approaching this conversations. So play along with this with me if you can. For this exercise, you need both of your hands free. So if you're holding anything in your hands, you need to put them down. So if you're holding your cell phones or your or iPhones or iPads, put them down for 1 second. I need you to put both of your hands in the air like this. Good. On the count of 3, we're going to clap our hands hard and leave them there. 1, 2, 3. Good. Now rub them up and down, clasp them together, and put them in your lap. Now look down at your hands. How many of you, by a show of hands, have your right thumb on top? Raise your hand if your right thumb is on top. Raise your hand and look around the room at all the people who have their hands raised who are the right thumbers. Get a sense of who the right thumbers are. Do you see them? Okay, hands back down. Raise your hand if you are a left thumber. Raise your hand. Let people know who the left thumbers are. Okay, good. It's okay. You can let people know which thumb you are. Okay, hands back down. When the researchers were studying this, the neuroscientists were studying something called autonomic functioning, which basically means your brain likes to get things neurosynaptically wired so we can get that thing down and move on to new and novel things. You have some core autonomic functions, key ones that you can't change, like if you sneeze, you'll close your eyes. Go ahead and try not to, it doesn't work, right? All the way up to the autopilots, and the autopilots are when your brain literally just kind of turns off and does what it always does. There are things like you drive to work for 30 minutes and you get there and you don't remember a thing about the drive you just took, right? That's your brain going on autopilot. This one's called a correlate autonomic, which means they think that whether you put your right thumb or your left thumb on top is correlated or related to something in your human development. Now, when they were first studying this, what do you think they thought the correlate was? Whether you put your right thumb or your left thumb on top. What do you think they thought it was related to? So the first idea they thought was hand dominance, whether you were right-handed or whether you were left-handed. You just saw the data. It's almost exactly 50-50, so is it related to hand dominance? No. So the next major theory, the people from right brain, left brain came in, and we're sure this was a right brain, left brain exercise. And they found that no, there was no correlation to right brain, left brain research. So now they're very interested, and they're grad students, so they had time on their hands, and they went after this. And they started doing cluster analytics, and they created complete profiles of the right thumbers and complete profiles of the left thumbers, and they behavioral personality indicators and Myers-Briggs. And they ended up, again, trying to create these complete profiles of each group. By the way, the graduate students had 2 nicknames for these groups. And so bear with me. For the people who have your right thumbs up, their nickname for your group is they called you the sexy people. You're the sexy people. No, you can't change your thumbs now. It's not a choice. You can't just move it over, right? For the people with your left thumbs, they called you the sneaky people. The sneaky people. I think that was good. They meant it strategic, right? And what was interesting when they studied this is there's a group of people that put neither their right thumb nor their left thumb on top. They actually put their thumbs side by side. Did we get any of those? Raise your hand if you were a side-by-side person. Okay, we got 1 or 2. By the way, the researchers say these are the people to watch. These are the people who are sneaky about being sexy, right? I want you to know. Now, there is a point to this exercise, so bear with me. You need your hands free again. We're going to do part 2. Put your hands back in the air like this. Count of 3, clap them again hard and leave them there. 1, 2, 3. Rub them up and down. Clasp them together. Put them up in front of your face. Butterfly them out. Now slowly put them back the other way with the other set of fingers interlaced and the other thumb on top. Squeeze it and put it down. How does it feel? How does it feel? Does it feel normal? Feel comfortable? Somebody said sexy. I heard that. Okay. I want you to get this feeling. This exercise gives you the understanding of what this uncertainty is all about. Part of our challenge and why I am advocating you should have these conversations is you're dealing with people sometimes who have devoted their lives to education. They've put in 10, 20, 30, 40 years into education, and they have it wired. They have an idea of how it's supposed to taste, touch, feel, and sound, and the new ways of doing it literally feel wrong. And it's okay that they feel that way. I think what we have to be willing to do is to step into the conversation and give them the data and show them what works and what doesn't, and be okay with the fact that some people are somewhat resistant because it's normal. It's because as humans, we actually like to get things down into a pattern and understand how things are going to move forward. Now, let's talk about these 7 major conversations. First one, and the most important one to have, is this conversation about swirl and blend. Swirl and blend is a conversation about who the students are and the teachers and reachers who are trying to connect with them and the infrastructure that they're using for learning. What we've seen in the U.S. in the course of the last 30 years is a huge shift. We have moved from a population in higher education that is 75% traditional, 18 to 22-year-olds going into higher ed, and 25% non-traditional, and it has flipped. It is now 75% non-traditional, people who are working, who are going part-time, and 25% traditional. 25% traditional, still a big number, but we now have a huge swath of our population that is using higher education. I'm going to argue what has happened as a result of the needs of our economy shifting to a state where we now need most people with some kind of higher education. It doesn't have to be a 4-year degree. It can be a certificate or a diploma or a 4-year degree. But now in the U.S. economy, most people need some kind of post-secondary education to be successful. And as we made that shift in the last 30 or 40 years, the higher education sector has shifted to figure out how they can meet their needs. And technology has been one way to open up access to students who didn't have access to it before. Does that make sense? Now, the other side of it, the flip of it, is if you want your economy to take off and actually be able to be more dynamic and meet the needs of different industries, you need to have an adult learning infrastructure that not only serves 18 to 22-year-olds, but also helps people change gears and change careers, which means you need to have different kinds of learning opportunities so you can intentionally use e-learning and outreach strategies to reach them. So you've got people at all different ages and stages connecting in higher education. And they come from different backgrounds using different infrastructures. But to do that, you need to think differently about the infrastructure for education. And for a long time in American higher education, the first 10 years of real e-learning launch, which was really about usually 1997 to about 2007, what we saw was the dominant conversation was what was better, or what is better, online learning or face-to-face learning. That was the dominant conversation. Was the quality of online learning the same as the quality of in-person learning? And what we know, by the way, just think about this for a second. How many of you in your own mind can think of a teacher who was really important to you, special, they inspired you, they made you maybe even motivated to do what you're doing? Raise your hand if you can think of a teacher like that, okay? How many of you also can think of a teacher that you would not wish on your worst enemy, that was so bad that you wanted to run screaming from the classroom? Can anybody remember those teachers? Okay, guess what? They exist in both online and on ground. They exist in blended formats. What is clear is that it's not the modality, it's how it's used and in what way it's used. So I wrote a piece for the Chronicle of Higher Education called Time to End the Family Feud, where I made the argument that it's time to move beyond what's better online or face-to-face and start saying, if we want to improve learning, if we want to provide the learning opportunities for people in different ways because they can't necessarily come 8 to 4 in the afternoon, Monday through Thursday, you've got to think differently about the models and think differently about the technology and about the different strategies. And it means being willing to use all the tools at our disposal. And if you look at this, it means putting together the face-to-face infrastructure with the online infrastructure and realizing it's about using all the tools at our disposal to try to improve learning. What we have seen is the universities and the colleges who have taken off are the ones who get that it's about tuning the blend. And tuning the blend is talking about the idea of, you know, when the string on the instrument, when the string on the guitar is too loose, it doesn't play music. When it's too tight, it breaks. Tuning the blend is the right mix of the technology and the face-to-face to improve learning. And what we've seen is the places in higher education that have taken off with this have seen remarkable outcomes. Couple of examples. Candace Teal at Stanford's Open Learning Initiative, she was with Carnegie Mellon before, has used human learning science to tune blended learning. What do you do online? What do you do face-to-face? And her idea is basically what they found is, how do you use human learning science to figure out how you make FaceTime with the professor precious, how you make it really invaluable, and what you can do online that can in some ways displace and allow for more acceleration. What she has found is if you tune this the right way, she's done experiments where she can teach statistics to advanced students in half the time with better results. But the idea is that you use learning as the anchor, and if learning is your dependent variable, you then can engineer the blending of what's online and what's face-to-face to see the kinds of outcomes you're looking at. The hot topic right now, and it's really not new, is flipped learning. And flipped learning came at Salman Khan and Khan Academy. When I was deputy director with the Gates Foundation, we were one of the folks who funded Sal Khan when he first started. The idea is not new. They used to use videotapes to do this, but now they have digital learning infrastructures to make it less friction, easier to do. But the basic idea is this. A student is often lost in math instruction when they're home alone at 11 o'clock at night. Why not flip the model so that when they're home alone at 11 o'clock at night, they're watching the lecture where they can start and stop it on digital video, and then when they're in class, they can do the math. And they can work with each other, they can work with their other peers, they can work with tutors, they can work with the faculty member. And so when they're stuck, they can overcome the challenges. Again, it's not that flipping is right for everything, but there are some topics where doing the lecture at home and doing the work in class is probably better. And the idea is to pull that together. Last example on this, tuning the blend, I love the Global Online Academy. The Global Online Academy are secondary schools, high-ability secondary schools from all over the globe. We're talking about the Beijing School, Jakarta, King Jordan Academy, Sidwell Friends, Georgetown, Eton College in the UK. They have collaborated to create an online infrastructure, and the goal was to add online learning to the experience of these students as they go through these very good schools. And the idea was to create a global classroom. And not just, and they wanted to have a couple of key goals. One is they wanted the students to experience what it was like to learn in an online format. Two was they wanted them to walk into a global classroom. So when they studied world history, they walked into a classroom that had people from the Middle East, people from Asia, people from Europe, people from the United States, and get a very different kind of learning experience. They're trying to make the most of the blend by creating a new learning experience by connecting. But the idea was, instead of trying to have an argument about what's better online or on ground, they figured out how to use all the tools at their disposal to try to reach a learning goal, which was trying to help people learn how to learn with online tools and try to create a global classroom to change a conversation. If you can get people to a point where they understand the importance that you're not saying, let's replace face-to-face. What you're saying is, how do we create an infrastructure that makes the most of face-to-face with blended learning and online learning? You can change the conversation and open it up to other things. But you have to have this conversation first. Because there are a lot of people, their biggest uncertainty is they're afraid that they're going to go away. They don't understand that this is going to be part of a blended infrastructure. By the way, this is what's happened in commerce. This is what's happened in healthcare. This is what's happening now in the world of education. What we're seeing is this, what I would call a rowdy blend, and people are trying to figure out how to pull this together. And there's a lot of learning going on about how do you do the best stuff online and the best stuff on ground and mix and match it. By the way, I work with an advanced analytics company, and what we have found is the absolute best students are the ones who blend. They are the ones who do some things online, some things on ground. We've seen it again and again at different universities. 1 out of 3 students in the United States is taking an online course, and most of them are scaffolded, which means they have some kind of learning management system that is a web shell against their instruction. It has just become part of the common infrastructure. It is no longer just the buildings, it is now the online infrastructure that has come together, but that's the first conversation. Once you get by that conversation, you can begin to have a conversation about mobile technology in particular. Why I'm bringing up mobile is because back in the mid-1990s, I used to try to talk to educators about the importance of email and how email was going to become a new infrastructure, and they thought I was crazy. The funniest thing now is all the faculty use email and the students don't, right? Because the students now use social networking tools and they don't really use email. And so we've changed. I remember in 1994 when I was at a conference talking about Mosaic and Netscape Navigator, when I was talking about web infrastructures, and basically we told colleges, every college and university in the United States was going to have a website within the next 10 years, and it would have a big expansive website talking about what they were doing. They thought we were on drugs, right? And now every single one has big detailed infrastructure websites, including giant e-learning portfolios for what they do. I would argue mobile learning is in the same kind of position, where we've got to get ready because it is becoming a new and dominant infrastructure. What we are finding is that students distributing knowledge leveraging mobile devices, handheld devices, tablets, and even laptops and all the rest, a BYOD strategy, which is a bring your own device strategy, has become essential in many infrastructures, figuring out how to get digital content to students in different ways. Why this really matters is because you're trying to get not just print anymore. Now you're trying to get text and simulations and presentations and contextual communication going, and digital devices, mobile devices can do all that, and it's become part of our infrastructure. By the way, mobile devices are a part of how we all live these days, right? If any of us go to the doctor, one of the first things we do as we're going to the doctor's office is we look up what we think is wrong with us. Right? Before we walk into the doctor's office, we've leveraged that mobile device in some way to get information for us. And if in a minute the doctor tells us something, we're checking him out to see whether or not he told us the right stuff. All right? Do me a favor, take out one of your mobile devices. My guess is everybody here has at least one. Go ahead and take them out. A lot of you already had them out. That's okay. Okay. I want you to find somebody near you that looks trustworthy, and I want you to trade your device with their device. Go ahead and trade them out. I'm good. Go ahead, trade them out. You'll be okay. Okay, I want to make 3 observations as you hold your neighbor's device. 1, there's a whole group of people in this room that are very happy right now because you just traded up. You got a better device, right? 2, I love how people react to this. There are some people who say, no, there is no way I'm trading my device, and they won't hand it over. There are other people who really like their device, and when they hand it over, feel the need to give you a mini orientation session to it. Look, it does this, and they're really excited. Then there are other people who are somewhere in between who feel the need to either lock or turn it off before they hand you their device, okay? Which, by the way, relates to the 3rd observation, which is the longer I let this exercise go, the more the anxiety goes up in the room, the more the nervousness goes up because somebody is touching your device, okay? These devices have become part of our personal infrastructure. They help us in how we live, how we work, and how we play. They are definitely coming into how we learn. Go ahead and hand them back because I don't want to get anybody in trouble, okay? What is clear is we have got to get beyond the dominant conversation on mobile devices. The number 1 conversation on mobile devices in higher education tends to be, how do we get students to turn them off? That can't be the dominant conversation. We have got to be more creative. There are educators now who are using mobile devices for instant response surveys in their courses. There are educators who are using them for immediate web quests where they have groups of students go out and survey different topics and come back. And what they do is they want to find out where does the group, where do they go? And then how do they synthesize that information? How do they analyze it? And how do they apply it? Because guess what? That's how most people are going to process information when they leave your caring arms. When they go into the world of work or they go into the world of government, they're going to be using devices to be able to find information. What you want to find out is where do they go, why do they go there, how do they synthesize it, how do they analyze it. I even have a friend of mine who teaches writing who actually uses mobile devices, and get this. She turns back papers with the grade with an MP3 file that actually is her talking them through the paper with an editing process. I really like this opening metaphor. Great use of imagery, nice forecast to lead the reader through it. And all the things she would normally write all over the paper, she sends in a digital audio file, and the students download it to a mobile device. They're allowed to edit their paper and turn it back in. And what they say they do is they sit at the kitchen table or the coffee shop on their mobile device listening to her talk them through the paper as they edit. And one of them had a great line. I was doing a student focus group, and one of the students said, "It feels like she's over my shoulder helping me the entire time," right? That's a different way of using mobile devices. That's getting beyond the conversation about whether or not students should turn them off and thinking about how we use the infrastructure. Mark my words, mobile is a big deal. Most of our digital content is going to be delivered via different kinds of devices, and Generation X, Y, and Z are majorly mobile. They're comfortable with it. It also enables a play-based, simulation-based, contextual learning-based infrastructure. I call this getting serious about play, but what this really is what we are seeing is, by the way, education has long talked about the value of contextual-based learning, getting people doing projects, getting them in simulations, getting them in contextual-based learning and internships, having them actually experience the learning. Digital technologies now provide us, and blended infrastructures and mobile infrastructures give us new tools. And the best example of that is video games, okay? The idea around video games is powerful. How many of you know a young person in your life that plays video games? Raise your hand if you know somebody who plays video games, right? Maybe it's somebody very close to you, like you, right? Okay? Think about this. Jane McGonigal, we don't have time to watch this, but Jane McGonigal, this will take you out to a TED Talk by Jane, who wrote a book called Reality is Broken, where she talks about gamers and how gamers might save the world because they're used to working with international groups solving wicked problems, solving really difficult problems. And the challenge here is understanding how game infrastructures can help us think about education. And one of the things she points out is, think about this. Most games, as kids play them, it is amazing how much time and effort they'll put in at one level to go to the next level, right? Kids will forego sleep, they'll forego food, whatever they have to do to go from one level to the next. What they have found, and by the way, is just think about it. You have to demonstrate knowledge, skills, and ability at one level, have it assessed before you're allowed to go to the next level. That kind of sounds like education, right? The idea is, what can we learn from this to think about how we can pull contextual and kind of deep, rich learning experiences into our world? Couple of good examples of this. I love James Paul G. He's a professor at Arizona State University. He has a great book on this. This blog post, though, I think is one of the best kind of entry points into this idea of broadening our thinking and thinking about how game-based work can be pulled into the world of education. There's also a Game-Based Research Institute in Wisconsin. And we also I have a link down here to EcoMove, which is from Harvard, from the Timothy Wirth Professor for Learning. And he really is talking about this idea of using game-based learning within education, and especially in K-12 education, to get people doing augmented reality work so that they can drive even more. Okay? Now, beyond the game-based learning, a few other things. One is a conversation on learning resource strategy. What is clear is we have different kinds of tools and resources to help people master learning objectives. It's not just print publications anymore, journal articles, and published textbooks. We've got a whole new infrastructure for this, and I encourage you to think about LRS, Learning Resource Strategy. Here's how Learning Resource Strategy works. You define their learning objectives. You then curate curricular resources, digital curricular resources, and I encourage you to curate with 3 major disciplines: build, buy, share. The idea is, what are you going to build yourself? What are you going to buy from the publishers? What are you going to share on the open content movement world? There's more than 2 million free courses out there, including the work of the MOOCs from Coursera and edX. The idea is figuring out how you're going to weave together your digital curriculum and leverage these kinds of resources. These are links out to these kinds of resources. The one in particular I'd encourage you to look at is OER Commons. OER Commons stands for Open Education Resource Commons. 200 countries, tens of thousands of educators sharing curriculum resources of every type. You just literally put in a term, and up will come the learning resources, socially ranked, most used, highest valued. What I've learned from great teachers, I did a book on great teachers last year, about 8 years ago, called Practical Magic, is that great teachers, they told me they are purveyors of the CASE method. CASE stands for, they basically say great teachers like the CASE method. CASE stands for copy and steal everything, right? Good teachers try to find good stuff from lots of places. This is a vibrant online community now sharing open, freely available resources. You are going to be mixing together curriculum you build, curriculum you buy, and curriculum you share. And you've got to figure out how you pull this together. What's nice about this is you can do continuous quality improvement on it and continually refine your playlist of curriculum resources for whatever that learning objective is. And then the final piece is find the assessments that tell you somebody has mastered that content. That's the iron triangle of LRS. What are the learning objectives? How do you curate the curricular resources? What are the assessments that tell you pull this together? That allows you to guide how you drive your digital infrastructure, if you will. Okay. What we've also learned is as you roll out more technology, don't think it's going to fix everything, and students will love you just because you use technology. Let me be clear about that. You get no cool points for using technology. Okay? Students will often tell you that sometimes technology gets in the way. You want to use technology because it works, and you want to use technology because it helps them learn more effectively. Don't think just because you're using online tools, suddenly students will be engaged. In fact, one of the biggest problems is we have trained students in primary and secondary school in a way of learning that involves lectures, rote memorization, and multiple choice tests. And when they get into higher ed and you start doing new engaging ways of learning, guess what happens? Your high ability learners say, whoa, stop. I've already been trained in the other way. You're now freaking me out. Okay? The idea is you've got to think about not only using these tools not just about using them because they're new and novel, you want to use them because they improve the learning. You also want to remember that part of this is to prepare these students for the world as it is. And the world as it is has a digital infrastructure. And the world as it is requires them to use not only cognitive skills, their IQ for example, but also non-cognitive skills. What we have seen clearly in the rollout of technology and education in the last 10 years is the importance of non-cognitive factors. Non-cognitive factors like, is a student on purpose? Do they know why they're doing what they're doing? And do they really own their purpose, or are they only doing it because their parents want them to do it? Okay? Are they willing to engage? Are they willing to really do the work? Do they have a sense of tenacity? Can they overcome the challenges that will come their way? And let me tell you what we have seen, especially when you're thinking about trying to get entrepreneurship going, is that these skills are actually more important than the cognitive skills. Okay? Realizing Michael Jordan, famous basketball player, was cut from his freshman basketball team. Walt Disney, famous businessman, rolled out all the Disney products, went bankrupt 19 times before he succeeded. The idea is helping students understand failure is learning, and part of what they have to do is understand how they overcome that, and you build that into your learning experience. So I wrote an article for EDUCAUSE Review that came out last year that was an open letter to students that basically challenged them. It was called You're the Game Changers in Next Generation Learning, which basically said with all these people innovating with new technologies and techniques, none of it was going to work unless students showed up with a sense of purpose and engagement and tenacity. And if they did, they had the right to challenge us as educators to build a more learning-centered, data-rich, high-value pathway for them through higher education. But it's got to be a two-way street. This is not about entertaining students. This is about engaging students and challenging them to actually step up and do some deeper learning. These resources will actually kind of plow you out into that. Now, to bring that to life, part of that is actually kind of driving into specific discussions around the uses of data. And I want to talk about two more final conversations. One, pulling this all together means you're going to have more data about what works and what doesn't work with your students than ever before. The use of data in education is nascent. We're just starting to use it. And what we see is that data is now, big data and analytics has been a big driver in the consumer world and in the healthcare world, and is now coming into the world of education. But it means bringing together insight analytics, which is understanding what works and what doesn't with different students, and action analytics, which is getting the data to the front lines, in the hands of faculty, in the hands of students. And I just want to give you a couple of examples of this, right? I love this dashboard from the Ford Fusion. The folks at Ford, when they did their data analytics, found out they had a whole group of customers who were mad at them in their hybrid because they weren't getting the gas mileage they were supposed to get out of their hybrid car. Part of the reason they weren't getting the gas mileage when they did the analytics was because they were driving the car the wrong way, including because they couldn't hear it because it was an electric car, they would rev the engine to see if it was on, right? And so they figured, well, the engineers thought the smart thing to do was to put the top 10 things you're doing wrong list together and send that to the customers. How did that go over? Not really well. So they decided to put together a new way of interacting, and they worked with a company called IDEO out of Stanford. And on the right side of this dashboard, what you'll notice is this beautiful plant. That plant is not a decoration, it is an interactivity. If you drive the car the right way, the plant grows and the flowers bloom and the leaves fill out. If you drive the car the wrong way, the flower begins to wither and the leaves start falling off and falling away. And it really is distracting. As you're driving the car, you're like, what am I doing wrong? Why are the leaves going away? And what they've done, by the way, this solves the problem because this is the 4 rights of data. This is important. You want to build the right infrastructure to get the right data to the right people in the right way. Let me say that again. You want to build the right infrastructure to get the right data to the right people in the right way. We've been working on this with a whole series of universities, and specifically we've been asking them to move into this upper right-hand quadrant. This is the idea of saying, if insight is one axis, with low insight is you have barely any data, only the data you have to report. High insight is deep predictive flow modeling, where you do deep data science to understand what works and what doesn't with your students. Low action is you're not changing at all. You're not innovating with policy or practice or technology. High action is you are innovating. We see, in the US especially, these 4 major quadrants. We have some institutions who don't really have any data, and they don't really want to change much. We have some who have a lot of data, but by the time they've analyzed the data and figured out what they want to do with it, what has happened with the students? What has happened to the students they collected the data on? Sometimes the data are 2 or 3 years old before they actually do anything with it. Think about that for a second. When you shop at Amazon, how long does it take them to do a data mining run and a predictive model about you and get the data back to you? Does it take them a week or a month? takes them under a second. It only takes longer because of your bandwidth, right? The idea is they want to get data right to the front lines to help you make a better decision. It's choice architecture. If you haven't read the book Nudge, it's a good book to read. The idea of Nudge is choice architecture to get you data to help you guide your decision. We have some institutions who are in this lower right quadrant who are adopting best practice, best practice. Why are you doing that? Because Harvard's doing it. Because Stanford's doing it. Just because somebody else is doing it, they jump on the bandwagon. It's not grounded in their data. When we were at the Gates Foundation, we saw this again and again. What we really want to move, if you're going to reduce the uncertainty around ICT, you have got to be willing to move into this upper right-hand quadrant where you're a student success scientist, where you use data to determine what are your challenges, you then try and test solutions, and then you try to get data in the hands of people on the front lines of learning. Get data right in the hands of faculty, right in the hands of students, right in the hands of advisors. And I want to give you just a couple of examples of that. We've been working with universities across the United States and some international, but folks like the University of Texas at Austin and Penn State, different two-year colleges, private sector colleges, really interesting independents like Morehouse and the others. I'm just going to give you a couple of simple examples of how this works. This is an app that actually takes data right to a student. It's called Degree Map, and every time they log in, a student or an advisor, it tells them exactly where the student is. The green says what you've completed, the blue is what you have in progress, the orange is what you have left. And the whole idea is anytime they log in, they know exactly how far along the education journey they are. And if they want to choose their next courses, it basically does the Amazon thing where it says, students like you at this stage of the program, here's the next set of courses you should take. And it tries to guide them towards synergistic course combinations, and the vision is to help them avoid toxic course combinations, combinations of courses that will wipe them out. And what we've seen from the data is this is one of the most powerful things you can do is actually guide the choices of your students. This is an app that was developed for faculty members that actually gives them real-time engagement. It's updated every 4 to 6 hours. So they can try something with their class on Monday morning, and by Monday night, they can have a heat map of their engagement of the students in their class. And if they use technology as part of the scaffold for their instruction, you actually can see engagement change in your students. And this has been concretely connected to student success in the courses. They learn more deeply and they're more engaged because the faculty member doesn't tell them what to do. It just tells them what's happening with engagement and learning in their class, and they have almost a thermostat around it, and they can click on individual students and understand what's driving their predictive model and what's driving their success. This one's for advisors. So advisors can literally look at their caseload and say, 2/3, 3/4 of my students right now, 75, 73% are doing just fine. I've got now 12% that are intervention targets that if I can reach out to them now, I can help them be more successful. And I've got 15% that are in real trouble. This is updated every day. And the idea is that they can use this to guide the outreach they have to students as opposed to finding out after the semester is over. This final one will be rolled out this fall with El Paso, and the idea here is almost a Fitbit for students. Students say, I want to get straight A's. This actually gets data to them and talks about their attendance, their timeliness, their class interactions, and their focus. And they are able, just like Fitbit and their fitness app, the idea is they can actually interact with this. But the whole idea here is you've got to get the data. The good news is think about your data strategy now. If you're going to start using technology, you put all these data points together in the right way, you can build ridiculously good predictive flow models, understand what are the momentum points, what are the tipping points, what are the challenges, and you can try and test solutions to try to improve the learning outcomes for the students that are coming through. Final conversation, the to what end conversation. Regardless of all of this, one of the most important things we have to do is remember that our students, when they come out, are preparing for a world that is going to require them to be lifelong learners. These deeper learning outcomes have to be at the center of the work we do. Skill-based training, radically important. Connected to workforce outcomes, very important. These outcomes are being asked for. If you look at the road ahead, these outcomes, critical learning, creative learning, social learning, every major business organization, every major civic organization talks about these outcomes. Our students having the ability to be critically reflective, be creative in their solutions, be able to have civil discourse and get along in this process. In fact, most people find jobs and lose jobs because of their social skills, not because of their technical skills. You realize that, right? Okay? The idea is and by the way, social skills today are more complex because now you need to how to understand how you do social connection across both face-to-face and online formats. You need to understand, when do you text, when do you email, when do you not do any of that, when do we have a face-to-face conversation, when do I pull my teams together? It's different. And then the ability to be a courageous learner, which is the ability to continue learning something new. Okay? The brain researchers have a great line. Their line is, if you want to stave off dementia and Alzheimer's as long as possible for you, you want to maximize your neuroplasticity, which is the ability of your brain to continue to develop and grow. You want to, I love this line, be a rookie every year. You want to try something that stretches you out of your comfort zone and learn something new. Learning something new, going into a rookie experience, which, by the way, for many of us, that means using technology in education, right? Being a rookie is healthy for us. And by the way, the best things our students can see if we're trying to help them develop these skills is an organization that is taking on a challenge like the implementation of technology in education and using its own skills. I always say there's nothing broken with education that can't be fixed by the best of education, which means the best thing your students can see is you being critically reflective about what's working and not working in your own education system, being creative about the solutions, having civil discourse and being able to get along as you have the conversation, and having the courage to try something new if you're going to drive in. Okay? I love this line from Eric Hoffer, philosopher from the 20th century. He said, in times of drastic change, it is the learners who inherit the future. The learned usually find themselves equipped to live in a world that no longer exists. So, two final ideas. When you pull these conversations together, I encourage you to continue them. Feel free to connect with me. I'm on all the social networks. If you go to markmilliron.com, you can connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn or however you want to connect. We really care about this. If you want to get creative about this, think about continuing to engage in these kinds of conferences. I'm a big fan of Big Ideas Fest, which uses design thinking together with technology to think differently about education. And like I said, in the plenary, we're going to dive deeper into organizations that have actually kind of used this to restructure themselves. I also have a link here for Civitas Learning Space. If you go to civitaslearningspace.com, it gives you videos, podcasts, research reports from organizations that are innovating with data, innovating with technology, innovating with learning models. Again, it's called civitaslearningspace.com. Worth checking out. Lots of good resources for you. Last two ideas. If you have these conversations and want to lead these conversations, I encourage you to buckle up and get ready, because as you lead these conversations, two groups of loud voices will come out and cause challenges for you. One group I like to call the caustic cynics. They're angry about everything before you even start. It doesn't matter what you're talking about, they're mad, right? A friend of mine calls them cave people, colleagues against virtually everything, right? It doesn't matter what you're talking about, they're upset. They don't want anything to change. Did you ever meet anybody like that? Do you know who I'm talking about? If you can't think of somebody like that, you might be. I want to point that out. They're only equaled in the problems they cause for you. They're equaled by the true believers. The true believers are people who think everything needs to change and we need to upend the entire system. Everything should be online learning. We should never have any face-to-face. Whatever they're into, everybody's supposed to be into. They tend to overpromise and underdeliver, and they cut the credibility of your initiatives. And when you're trying to drive change, these two groups of loud voices cause a lot of problems. They tend to be bullies, and they tend to take over the conversation. The only way we're going to be able to overcome the uncertainty of technology in education is having the courage to calm down the caustic cynics, to temper the true believers and calm them down, and create a space where we can really have critical reflection, thoughtful advocacy, we can look at what works and what doesn't, and learn together about how we use all the tools at our disposal to be able to make this change. Why this matters, folks, is if you look at the data is pretty clear. Education is a game changer for students. It is a difference maker for countries. It is a difference maker for economies. If you want to open up the pathway to possibility, you want to improve education, you want to expand education. And if you want to improve and expand learning, you want to use all the tools at your disposal. And what you want to be able to do is to innovate with all of those tools to figure out how you can improve and expand learning for as many students as possible. What is very clear is there are millions of students in your countries that are striving to use education to open up their pathway to possibility. You do them honor by asking the hard questions about what will work to improve and expand their education options. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mark David Millilon, for the inspirational and catalytic talk. Time's now for questions and comments. มีคำถามจากผู้เข้าร่วมประชุมไหมครับยกมือขึ้นเดี๋ยวจะมีเจ้าหน้าที่นำไมโครโฟนไปให้ท่านครับเรียนเชิญครับมีไหมครับ
This is where the best and brightest respond early and often, right? So come on in. Any questions, reflections, or thoughts?
I have my own questions. Okay, right. So can the online academy or the open educational resource help the poor or the rural schools to achieve their educational goals?
So what we've seen with open education resources is the expansion of high-quality learning opportunities to more people than ever before. And I'll give you two examples. The Cape Town Declaration that launched, in many ways, the big open education movement globally was all about the idea of making sure that what you learn is not based on where you live. And the idea of using the internet to make sure you can bring high-quality courseware and materials to students has really taken off. And now they have tools that allow people to actually take assessments and then have curricular resources brought to them. I'd encourage you to, there's one called EdReady, edready.org. It actually lets you take an early assessment and then it brings open free resources to you and lets you take assessments and guide yourself. There's a book called DIYU. DIYU stands for Do It Yourself University.
Right.
It's written by Anya Komenets, and it's all about this idea of students guiding their own learning and using these open learning resources to advance. And more educators are now figuring out how do they help students actually become more entrepreneurial with their learning and leverage these learning resources. I actually think, and I'll talk about this later in the plenary, I think one of the big advantages of MOOCs, for example, is MOOCs can be used as, in many ways, 21st century extension, bringing some of the best lecturers from all over the world to anybody and everybody who can access it. And the idea is figuring out how we as educators can curate those things and pull them together. I think open education resources are a powerful thing for us. And by the way, the colleges that have leveraged them have done things like taking their major courses and converted them mostly to open and have saved millions of dollars for their students.
Thank you very much.